roughly 10 days into the Trump administration, and Vice President JD Vance has taken the nation by storm. He's had more memorable moments in the last week and a half than Kamala Harris had during her entire time in the Biden White House. I want to talk about some of these images of Vance that have emerged during his days as vice president and talk about what it means for the next 4 years, what you can expect from an administration like this. So by now, I'm sure almost all of you have seen the viral "I don't really care" Margaret clip. JD Vance appeared on Face the Nation on Sunday. He was discussing immigration and asylum vetting with Margaret Brennan, and he kind of eviscerated her. I mean, it was a pretty brutal interview. There's a clip of him saying, "I don't really care. I don't want this person in this country," when she is defending people who have been supposedly vetted by ICE, but ultimately proved to be here with malintent. JD Vance specifically was discussing the man who had been allegedly vetted by ICE, but was plotting a terrorist attack during the campaign.
I want to ask you about refugee admissions, which were just suspended by the president. That has nothing to do with the U.S. border. Refugee screening takes 18 to 24 months to go through. They are heavily vetted. Left literally at the airport this week were thousands of Afghans, some of whom had worked with the United States government and were promised to come here. When you talked to us in August, you said, "I don't think we should abandon anybody who's been properly vetted and helped us." Do you stand by that?
Well, Margaret, I don't agree that all these immigrants or all these refugees have been properly vetted. In fact, we know that there are cases of people who allegedly were properly vetted and then were literally planning terrorist attacks in our country. That happened during the campaign, if you may remember. So clearly not all of these foreign nationals have been properly vetted.
But there are 30,000 people in the pipeline, Afghan refugees.
But my primary concern as the vice president, Margaret, is to look after the American people. And now that we know that we have vetting problems with a lot of these refugee programs, we absolutely cannot unleash thousands of unvetted people into our country.
It's not good. These people are vetted.
Just like the guy who planned a terrorist attack in Oklahoma a few months ago, he was allegedly properly vetted. And many people in the media and the Democratic Party said that he was properly vetted. Clearly he wasn't. I don't want my children to share a neighborhood with people who are not properly vetted. And because I don't want it for my kids, I'm not going to force any other American citizens' kids to do that either.
No, and that was a very particular case. It wasn't clear if he was radicalized when he got here or while he was living here.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country, and I think most Americans agree with me.
I think this is an important interview for a lot of reasons. First off, this clip is hilarious. I don't really know why Margaret Brennan agreed to do this. They've actually faced off before. Margaret Brennan was one of the two moderators during the vice presidential debate when Tim Walz was still on the campaign trail. And I'm sure most of you agree with me. Maybe you have a different opinion, but it was a phenomenal performance by JD Vance. It really launched him onto the national stage when a lot of people didn't know enough about him, didn't feel like they had really seen his personality. And he has an interesting challenge. Donald Trump is obviously a very specific orator. He's talented, he's charismatic, but he's brash. He's a little rough around the edges. And JD Vance is proving over and over again, especially during the VP debates and now again with this interview, that he can articulate the issues that are important while also presenting a different kind of charisma and charm. I don't know that Trump could have pulled off the same kind of interview as this. I think they both handle the press well and differently, and it's interesting to see JD Vance develop his own style, especially because so many people believe that he's likely to launch his own bid for the presidency in 2028. So while the face-off with Margaret Brennan was amusing, notable, especially for people who don't trust Margaret Brennan and the mainstream media, this interview on Face the Nation was also a chance for JD Vance to address the January 6ers, their pardons. She attempted to really pin him in a corner, saying, "You said you wouldn't pardon violent criminals." This is, suggesting that he has now split from Donald Trump, that they are already at odds despite being barely 2 weeks into their partnership as president and vice president. And I think JD Vance countered really beautifully, and I think he talked about something that we need to remember as we move forward. He said that actually we always promised a case-by-case review, and we did that. We came in prepared. We reviewed the cases, we made a plan, and we offered pardons. I find this deeply fascinating because he also brought up due process. He said that these people's due process rights were violated.
Did you counsel the president against these blanket pardons for 1,500 people,
well, Margaret, I noticed
including those who committed violence?
Margaret, I noticed that you cut off the thing that I said immediately after that. The full quote is that, of course, there are gray areas. And here's the nature of the gray area. Merrick Garland's Department of Justice, denied constitutional protections in the prosecutions. There were double standards in how sentences were applied to the J6 protesters versus other groups. What the president said consistently on the campaign is that he was going to look at a case-by-case basis, and that's exactly what we did. We looked at 1,600 cases, and the thing that came out of it, Margaret, is that there was a massive denial of due process of liberty, and a lot of people were denied their constitutional rights. The president believes that. I believe that, and I think he made the right decision.
This seems to be something that I think you'll see a lot with the Trump administration. Trump himself was treated pretty badly by the Biden Justice Department, especially since Biden, at the end of his time in office, issued Hunter's pardons, issued pardons to his families, pardoned Liz Cheney, and said, oh, well, you know, it's political. They would be pursued politically out of political bias, and I need to protect them. It seems like Trump already was pursued out of political bias, and he and a lot of other organizations were not given a fair chance in court, were not necessarily able to present defenses, or they were treated poorly by the Justice Department in what I would think is kind of an abuse of government. So the fact that JD Vance was able to not only address immigration, but also reaffirm his commitment to Donald Trump and their united front, as well as bringing up the corruption within the Justice Department and the importance of due process, is really key. I mean, this is 1 week into his vice presidency, and he's already come out with a pretty strong and phenomenal interview. It's definitely a top moment of the last 10 days for me. Vance also appeared at March for Life, which really won the hearts and minds of a lot of Christians and Catholics in this country. March for Life is the anti-abortion rally that's held in D.C. every year. Other vice presidents and presidents have attended in the past, but I think the image of having Vance, a later-in-life Catholic convert who describes himself as a devout Catholic, not only hold signs and walk alongside those people rallying for this cause, but also speaking at the rally was really important. He had some really strong things to say. I'll play a couple clips.
Thank you. Good afternoon, marchers. Thank you for having me. And it is an honor to be standing with you here today for life. We are proud to march with you. And yes, we will be back next year. The excitement, the passion, the unwavering conviction that every single person here on the National Mall clearly feels. It is deeply moving to me and means more to President Trump and I than I could possibly say. And it is the task of our government to make it easier for young moms and dads to afford to have kids, to bring them into the world, and to welcome them as the blessings that we know they are here at the March for Life. Now, it should be easier to raise a family, easier to find a good job, easier to build a home, to raise that family in, easier to save up and purchase a good stroller, a crib for a nursery. We need a culture that celebrates life at all stages, one that recognizes and truly believes that the benchmark of national success is not our GDP number or our stock market, but whether people feel that they can raise thriving and healthy families in our country.
All in all, the sentiment that life is important to not just the Trump administration, but JD Vance personally really helps define him as a politician. Abortion is used as a political issue to drive apart, especially the genders, but younger demographics. And now you have this young family man. I mean, JD Vance is 40, 41, and he's not only ascended from really challenging upbringings, but also opted into a life of faith and opted to speak vocally about this issue. I think is really important. He tends to be pretty empathetic in his approach when he's persuading people to his arguments, and I think this was a great place to see him again during the first 10 days. Some people would be in this mode. I could imagine political advisors telling him, like, we don't want to take too many strong actions. We don't want to be too bold. We want the country to feel unified. And I think it's important that he is openly displaying his values this early on. He's not waiting until halfway through Trump's presidency to see how he's polling. He is sticking to his convictions and also showing up for the people who supported him, because a lot of conservatives, despite concerns over Trump's stance on abortion, really believe that the Republican Party is more likely to achieve the means to the ends for the anti-abortion movement in this country. There were several small moments throughout the last 10 days that I think really helped develop JD's image in the public eye. They are basically charming, and I think that will help people develop their own affinity for him, separate from their support of Donald Trump. Of course, the first one is his kids at the inauguration. I think it's so important for Americans to see young families in public. This is something I see from time to time with mom lifestyle vloggers. They talk about the fact that there's just not a lot of space for them. If they have small children, often they feel pressure that they can't go to restaurants, coffee shops, wherever, because your kid has to be quiet, or it's really meant for adults, or whatever. And of course, you want children to be behave the best they can for an age appropriate level. You want them to, not throw things and make everyone's life unpleasant. On the other hand, I think we should want to see young families in public. I think we should want to see them wherever we go, because we ultimately want a birth rate to rise, and we want to be a pro-family culture. We can't be a pro-family culture if we also expect kids to exist in the background, or sort of in the off-camera sense. So seeing him have to deal with his kids like ruffling his hair, and I think Alicia Vance was obviously doing a lot to say, like, okay, let's keep our hands to ourselves, but there's something sweet about that. I mean, people remember that JFK had a young family. It's impactful, and especially if we're looking towards 2028, it will be nice to say he is raising kids alongside all the other Americans. Sure, he's vice president. Sure, probably has lots of other opportunities for his children, or maybe resources, but he is in the trenches of parenthood the same way a lot of other people are. I was also really charmed by this video that Speaker Mike Johnson put out. So in the most of current year thing I've seen online in 2025 so far, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson pulled out his iPhone to film JD Vance seeing the Oval Office for the first time. I guess during his time in the Senate, he had no reason to visit Biden in the Oval Office, so he had never seen it. And we get this, again, just only in modern social media and journalism would you get the Speaker of the House himself pulling out his phone to record the vice president seeing the Oval Office. You can see it in the exchange, like, JD Vance is walking behind Trump, and then President Trump stops and says, okay, well, go ahead. And it's like, no, Mr. President, you first. JD Vance's story has always been important to American people. I think especially middle Americans, Americans from Appalachia, who feel as though they're often overlooked. JD Vance overcame a very challenging upbringing. I've always felt that Hillbilly Elegy was one of the best reasons to select him, because it wasn't just conservatives who knew who he was. That book was something that I heard elite liberal women reference constantly after it came out, because it opened their eyes to a part of American life that they were not privy to. And I think JD Vance ascending to where he has and working as hard as he has is something that makes a lot of people in America proud. They may not know him personally, but they feel as though he's representing their story. So getting this home video from Mike Johnson was very cool. I think you also got a sense of this humble charm that JD Vance has naturally with his post about the Naval Observatory. He tweeted basically a thank you to the American public, saying that he is so appreciative that he and his family get to live there and they're going to take good care of it. The Naval Observatory is the residence of the vice president. It's, I think, about 3 miles from the White House. It's all in D.C. And for this family from Ohio, obviously, a family of young children, you've got to raise them somewhere. And I'm sure they were wondering what would that be like. It's worth noting there's this report that neither party has confirmed, but that Kamala Harris denied the Vances a customary opportunity to visit. I guess normally someone from the vice president's family will go and kind of see what it's like. I'm sure you have to decide what you're moving, and in their case, where they're going to put their children and get acclimated. And she declined this. Reportedly, she didn't get to do it when she was coming into the vice presidency, but it was also COVID, so there's some questions about it. It seems to me like she was just being petty. And to contrast these two people, we have Vance, the family man, who is so thankful to have this. I never saw a tweet like that from Kamala Harris. Maybe there is one, but one of her last final interactions as vice president is to deny this young family a chance to see this house that is not hers. It's the American people's, which JD Vance openly acknowledges. So I thought it really underlined, again, this sort of charm that he has to him, that he's really seemed to not taken for granted the things that he is getting, despite that he is rapidly becoming one of the most famous people in the world. And I don't know, it's nice. It's just a small one post on Twitter, but it's sort of charming. I think for most people, the most memorable JD Vance moment from the first week and a half of his vice presidency will be his tie-breaking vote to confirm Pete Hegseth as the Secretary of Defense. Pete Hegseth had kind of a tough ride. I thought he did well in his hearings, but obviously the former Fox News commentator's personal background, details about drinking, allegations that have been brought against him were constantly brought up in the news cycle. It seemed like he was one of the nominations that the media and definitely Democrats really did not want to see go through. At the last minute, Mitch McConnell defected and voted with the Democrats, so it was up to JD Vance. There was an image of JD Vance being hustled down the corridor, and for the very first time in his power as the president of the Senate, he cast this tie-breaking vote and confirmed Hegseth. It was a victory for a lot of people who felt like Hegseth was being given the Brett Kavanaugh treatment, and I think it was also confirmation that JD Vance is backing Trump and he's not. I don't know why we feel like we have to worry about his loyalty, but I guess people are nervous that there'll be another Mike Pence. And JD Vance, I just can't imagine what it's like to have gone from being a senator to being vice president and getting to cast these votes. I also don't think it's the last time that you will see JD Vance casting a tie-breaking vote during the confirmation. There's, I think, maybe 20 people left. We've gotten a number of confirmations through, but there are a number of people who are fairly controversial who seem to have a target on them. You've got Marco Rubio, who got confirmed with no problem, unanimously, seems to have more friends in the Senate. It also didn't seem like Democrats felt it was worth the fight. But then there are people like Pam Bondi, RFK Jr., Kash Patel, who have a much more uphill battle, who seem to be the target of a little bit of Democratic furor and a little bit of progressive anti-Trump sentiment. They don't want the more quote-unquote radical choices to be confirmed. So I think you'll see JD Vance cast the tie-breaking vote. I'm going to guess at least 3 more times. It could be as many as 5. I don't think Hegseth is the only person who will have a tough road to confirmation. And seeing JD Vance have this moment, I think, feels like a win, especially to a lot of MAGA supporters who felt like the criticisms of Hegseth were kind of ridiculous and unfair. So overall, killer week for JD Vance, killer week and a half, I should say. He's really come out of the gate strong. I've always been a fan of JD Vance as the vice president selection. I think his story is really important. I think the fact that he used to be a never Trumper and he's addressed it so gracefully is cool. And I think having a young, vibrant, outspoken vice president is a good sign for this country. The Democrats always claim to be the party of youth, but it's JD Vance who's really rallying around young people and conservative values, which I find refreshing. I really like that. And JD Vance, like I said, has a tough job. He is never going to be Trump. No one should try to be Donald Trump. That would be impossible. But he also has to carve out enough of his own personality and take leadership on enough causes that he can capitalize on the momentum that being the vice president has. I think he has a bright political future. I'm curious to hear what all of you think. I'd love to hear what you thought the top JD Vance moments were. These were the things that stuck out to me. These were the things that I bookmarked on Twitter, kind of saved for my own memory. But there are probably tons of stuff that has gone by wayside. It's amazing the pace that the Trump administration is moving, and the fact that I just described basically 5 things that were more memorable than Kamala's first year and a half as vice president is a good sign, because I think we'll see a lot of JD Vance and a lot from the Trump administration. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. And guys, thank you so much for those of you who have subscribed, who've been commenting, who've been engaging with this. It means so much to me. It's been wild to sort of launch on my own and think, well, what do people want to see? What do I want to make? I'd love to hear if there are any topics that are important to you, any beats that you'd like me to start covering. I'm so appreciative for all of your support. You can still find me on X if you want to. You can still watch my live streams with The Quartering Monday through Wednesday. And of course, we're going for weekly videos right now. One day I'll ramp it up. But for now, check back next week. There'll be another video. Thank you for everything.